What you're looking at here is the M2 Tabletop and Booklet Maker. The purpose of this machine is to take a stack of papers, staple it, fold it, and turn it into a small booklet. This particular machine can handle various sizes of paper up to an 11 by 17 sheet. It has 2 staple heads built into it, but you can add additional staple heads or move the existing ones around. I'll show you just some of the basic setup. This is where you actually put the paper into the machine. It is pulled into the machine using some rubber rollers. And although it may be a little difficult to see, the rubber rollers are right inside here. These 2 devices here are staple heads. And as it's brought into the machine, it sits and rests back on this back plate here, which can be adjusted depending on the size of paper you're using. It staples it using the staple heads, and then the rollers bring it up through the machine where it is folded. Now, this particular machine is partially automatic, partially manual. It is automatic because it does staple it, fold it, and spit it out automatically. However, you do need to manually bring the paper over and put it into the machine, and it will do 1 stack of paper at a time. You can't set a stack of 500 on here and have it just peel them off, staple them, fold them. To do that, you would need a higher-end booklet maker. But for your entry-level to mid-level volume booklet making jobs, this should be just fine. Now, to set it up, there are some knobs here that can be loosened by turning counterclockwise, and you can adjust these guides by sliding them in and out. Now, there is a guide on here that will show you A3 size paper, A4, A5, which is typically used in Europe, 11 inch, 8.5, and 5.5 inch. So it has some preset markings on here for the size of paper you're using. It also has an adjustable backstop depending on the paper that you're using. So what I'll do here is show you how to adjust that. Again, just to open the cover here. And back here in the back of the machine, there's another knob that can be loosened. And this back plate can be slid forward and backwards depending on the size of paper you'll be using. The longer the paper, the farther back it's going to need to go. The smaller, the farther forward you'll bring it up. Now, if I put my paper into the machine, I will adjust the sides to start with. And you want a little bit of give on each side. You don't want it to be too tight. Otherwise, it might possibly hold onto the paper and keep it from entering the machine. But basically, it just goes into the machine and kind of slides in, and it hits this backstop, as you can see back here. As it slides in, it hits that backstop. And again, you can move this forward, backward, depending on the size of paper. If you look at the front of the machine here, you'll notice a little gray bar. It says 11 inches, A4, 14 inches, A3, 17 inches. And that's just based on the size of paper that you're going to be using. And if you look a little farther in here, it also has 8.5 A5 paper. So I'll put this in here. And I'm going to want to adjust that backstop until this paper here, the line and the edge of the paper here lines up with 11 inches, because I'm using just standard 8.5 by 11 paper. So I'll bring that up till it rests right about the 11-inch mark where that line is, and I'll tighten that backstop up. And we're now ready to create a booklet out of 8.5 by 11 paper. That's how you adjust it for the size of paper. Now, if you look in here, as I mentioned before, there are some staple heads. They can be removed. If you look here, there's a little lever that I can actually slide to the left. And what it does when I slide that over, it releases 2 brackets here, allowing the staple head to be pulled out of the machine. They're fairly simple to set up and adjust. Again, these 2 prongs here just go through the two holes down inside of the machine. And if I wanted to adjust that, I could move it over, or I could bring it over here. Now, I'm doing just a standard 8.5 by 11 booklet, so all I really want are 2 staples stapled into the center of the paper. So I'll put the back in, and you just slide it until it's pushed all the way in. Now I'll just bring this bracket here back down to lock those into place. And now that will not pull back out. Now, the stapler does use a 26/6 size staple. It can use a loop staple or a flat staple. And the way to eject the staples is to pull this bracket here back, and it allows access to the staples. This just lifts up. The staples just slide in on this rail and bring this back up, And it is spring-loaded, so it will push those staples up to the front of the staple head. Before you do that, I recommend bringing this back down. And this right here, this part of the bracket goes over this and just keeps that from popping back up. And you now have the staples inside of the machine, and it's ready to staple the paper and fold it. Now once everything's set up inside of the machine, you can bring this cover back down. It also has a paper holder right here, a booklet holder. As you put the paper into the machine, it actually comes out right here, and then you can just set it down here into this catch tray as you do the second one, the third one, the fourth one. And that's just convenient because you don't need additional space on a table. You can just hold the folded booklets right here. Now, starting the machine is very easy. There is a plug on the back. In fact, let me turn this around so you can see that. This plugs right into the back of the machine, where it is then plugged into the wall. And it also has a built-in circuit breaker. If for any reason the machine's overloaded and that's flipped, the machine will not work. You just simply need to push that back in to reset it. There's an on-off switch here. As soon as you turn it on, you'll see an orange light. There's the start button and the reset button. The purpose of the start button, obviously, is to get the machine going, to pull the paper inside, staple it, and fold it. Now, if for any reason you put too many sheets of paper through the machine, you can use the reset button, which actually turns the motor into reverse mode and will allow that paper to be backed back out of the machine. This particular unit, the M2 Booklet Maker, is capable of folding and stapling up to 15 sheets of 20-pound paper. Now that's just your standard copy paper. So if you're going to be putting a cover stock cover onto your booklet, take that into consideration and realize you're not going to be able to do a full 15 sheets of paper. Now I'm going to start off by using just a couple sheets of paper just so you can get an idea as to how this works. As you saw previously, we have already set this up for 8.5 by 11 paper. I'll make sure that these side guides now are brought over to the 8.5-inch mark. I'll put the paper in, loosen up the right guide a little bit, and just again make sure that goes in there fairly easily. If it's too tight, it won't allow the machine to pull the paper in and staple it and fold it. So just let it fall down to the machine until it hits that back plate, and now you're ready to staple and fold it. Now you need to hold the start button down for just a few seconds. That will let the machine start up. Once it's started, you should be able to let go of that, and it will pull it through the machine and finish the process. So it has now stapled it along the spine. Maybe a little hard to see. Let me open that up for you. So it put a couple of staples here, and just folded it. Brings it up through the machine, and now you have a booklet, which can be used for a book, a brochure, a pamphlet. And you can put a cover on that as well. Now, if I were doing a lot of these, I could easily just take this and set it down into that catch tray. Okay, so now I'm going to fold a booklet with cover stock. So I'm going to put it in there with some paper, set it down into there. One thing to take into consideration is sometimes when you fold the paper and it's run through the machine, it may come out a little crooked. It may not be perfectly even. One thing that you can do is you can adjust this backstop, bring it up or back a little bit. That'll determine where that staple will go into the paper. If it's not stapling right in the center, you may need to bring it back just a little bit or bring it forward just a little bit to get it just precise. And if it's going through crooked, it is possible that you'll need to adjust the side guides and the back guide just a little bit. It may be when you tighten it up, it was just a little bit crooked, and that can happen. So I'll be folding cardstock with some paper. So there you have cardstock with paper. You'll see the staples right there along the spine. And in my opinion, it does create a very nice looking book. The more papers that you do use, however, you will need to take into consideration that you will sometimes get a little bit of paper sticking out at the sides. That's because the paper on the inside versus the paper on the outside is folded, and due to the thickness of the booklet, it may be pushed out a little bit more. And in a case like that, you will need to get a guillotine cutter, an arm cutter, and cut those edges off to square it up. Copy shops and other locations that use booklet makers on a regular basis, especially ones that are doing the full 15 sheets, and other booklet makers that do even more almost have to always square it up with a paper cutter after the process, just because when you fold the paper over, it will kind of fan out a little bit on the ends, and it just needs to be squared up. Now, if you're just doing, anywhere from 2 to, I'd say, 10 sheets of paper, you'll probably be okay. But if you're doing the full 15 sheets of paper, and if you're running into that problem, you may want to consider buying a paper cutter to square that up. Now, as far as maintenance on this machine, there's not a whole lot required. Now, if you are going to clean it out because you are dealing with paper and dust will get in there, just use a damp rag to clean it out. It is recommended not to use any chemicals or solvents because it may cause damage to the machine. However, the rubber rollers, which are right up here in the front and a little bit difficult to see, you can access those and you can clean them off because they will accumulate ink and paper dust and will cause the rollers to slip a little bit. If you notice that it's slipping, it's jamming, a good indicator is that the rollers are dirty and just need to be cleaned. In order to clean the rollers, you will need to use something called Roller Cleaner Rejuvenator. It is safe for rubber rollers. If you use the incorrect solution on those rollers, it can dry them out and cause them to crack, such as rubbing alcohol. That is not good for silicone rollers. The Rubber Cleaner Rejuvenator not only cleans the rollers, but it keeps them hydrated and keeps them from cracking. So there you have it, the M2 Booklet Maker, designed to make booklets on the fly. This is just a sample of what it can do. It can be fully customized in-house. You can print off pretty much anything you want on a printer, laser printer, inkjet printer, run it through the machine and create a booklet.